Well, hi there, I'm Noah Bradley. This is Handmade House TV, and on today's episode we're going to talk about the perfect log cabin, how you can achieve the log cabin of your dreams. Stay tuned. Well, all right, thank you for tuning in today to Handmade House TV. Today we're going to talk about the perfect log cabin. And I'm going to share with you photographs of the perfect log cabin, and I'm going to show you some of how it comes together, how the perfect log cabin can be built. Now, of course, the response from many will be there's no such thing as a perfect log cabin. A log cabin that satisfies everyone, that everyone feels is the perfect log cabin, the ultimate log cabin. Is there such thing? And likely there's not one. There's not a one-size-fits-all that everyone would view as the perfect log cabin. I've built many different log cabins throughout my career, each one of them unique from the other, designed to match the site on which they were built and to accommodate the people that I have built the log cabin for. And to be honest, just about every one of them is dear to my heart. It's hard to pick out one that stands and shines above all the rest. But there is one. There's one that seems to draw the most favorable reviews, that I get the most amount of requests about, that people want the blueprints for, that people will say, that's the cabin that I want. That's exactly what I want. And in fact, this cabin that I built is so precious that it is more noted for artists randomly appearing in the front yard and starting to do paintings of your home. If you live in a home that you find that artists are setting up their easels and in order to do a portrait of your particular home, you know you've got a fairly attractive log cabin, that's for certain. And in fact, the owners of this particular cabin that we're going to talk about today, the perfect log cabin, one day they received a catalog in the mail from a well-known catalog merchandiser, and on the cover of it was an artistic painting of their particular log cabin, and this catalog company was selling prints of their particular cabin, which rather surprised them, but nonetheless it's pretty complimentary that that happened. And so let's begin, first of all, the exploration of how do we achieve a perfect log cabin? What are the qualities of a perfect log cabin in order to start narrowing down how we achieve that perfect thing? And there are four really distinctive categories that you need to consider. The first one is quality. If you're gonna build a log cabin, you want it to be and it wants to be the perfect log cabin. You want it to be the absolute best that it possibly can be. You clearly don't want to cut any corners. You don't want it to be cheap in any way. You want it to be of the highest quality imaginable. When it comes time to put the roof on your log cabin, you don't want an asphalt shingle roof. You want of a high quality one, such as a copper roof or cedar shake, or perhaps even a slate. When it comes time to do the flooring, you want wide plank flooring. When it comes time to do the logs, you want the best species of logs possible. And so quality is it. You don't want to, in order to build your log cabin, you don't want to cut any corners as far as quality goes. And the next feature you want in your log cabin is you want it to be durable. You want it to last a long time. You want it to be around for centuries. You want it to be as maintenance free as possible. You want it to, you don't want to build something that's a high maintenance item that's going to cost you a fortune as time goes by, or that when you perhaps sell it or you get tired of maintaining it, that it immediately falls down and goes away. So how do you discover what the best way how to build a durable maintenance-free log cabin is? You look to the past. You do much like we did in our last video here. You go seek out log cabins from the past, the historic ones, the ones that have been proven to last for centuries. Clearly, if it has lasted that long, centuries coming forward, if you build one like it today, it will last for centuries into the future. So you really want to stick with the traditional method of building a log cabin, much as you see behind me here, with hewn logs, flattened faces inside and outside, with a chink gap in between. The third quality you look for in building a perfect log cabin is a timeless design. You want to build something that's attractive to you the day you build your log cabin, and it's attractive to you decades into the future, that you never look back and you wonder, why was it that I did that particular thing? Fashions come in and out of house design just like they do with clothing design. But some designs are timeless. When we look at vintage log cabins, such as we did in the last episode, we're all amazed at how beautiful they are. Why were they beautiful? Why were they attractive when they were built and still attractive to us today? And that's because they implemented the nature into the construction of their home, and they built with timeless design. So if we build our log cabin, if we're seeking to build a perfect log cabin, we look to the past, we look to things that were attractive when they were built, and if they're still attractive today, and that's what we want to implement when we want to build our perfect log cabin going forward. And finally, number 4, the last thing on our list for building a perfect log cabin is stonework. I've yet to see today the log cabin that really achieves the best it possibly can be, that reaches the level of perfection if it doesn't have some really quality stonework on it. In particular, the stone chimney. And I'm not talking about a stone chimney that has some faux rock glued to it, but a solid stone chimney onto it with a nice stone fireplace on the inside. A log cabin without a stone fireplace is like a canoe without a paddle. It just doesn't fulfill its greatest purpose. So you really want to get some quality stonework in it. A stone chimney, minimal stone foundation is so much better. And of course, if you were to work in a little bit of a stone addition, well, that even brings it up to the next possible level. So here we have these 4 elements of how to obtain a perfect log cabin. And clearly this is a wide range. Basically every log cabin that I've ever built has fallen into this, and it's quite a diverse range. How do you narrow down in order to achieve perfection? And what I would like to present to you today is how this particular log cabin that we're going to talk about today, how it achieved perfection. And that is that I had a wonderful couple who came into my life, and this is actually a fairly typical story of my entire career. They lived in a suburban, large city environment, and they sought to own a log cabin in the countryside, or at least life in the countryside. And so on weekends they would leave the city, and they would take drives and stay in rural locations, mountainous locations, scenic locations, drive up and down the back roads, and eventually, as nature would have it, they found a perfect little parcel of land, and that they absolutely loved, and they bought it. And so then they would go out on weekends and just sit, maybe have a picnic, enjoy the particular property. But it got to the point where eventually they realized that they'd like to start enjoying the property, start staying on the property. It wasn't that they were ready to move to the property or relocate, but they wanted just a kind of a weekend cabin, something that they could possibly enjoy. And they got in touch with me, and the reason why they were drawn to me is because of my reputation of building quality homes, of building the highest quality possible. But they, like many of us, were also restricted in the wallet, that they wanted to keep the price of the cabin to a minimum. And so here we have the 4 elements that we previously talked about: high quality and stone work, and timeless design, and building in the best possible manner. But we also brought in this 5th element of how can we make it as low priced as possible, and without being foolish, and such as a lot of the tiny home movement, where you're basically compacting everything into too small of a space. So I was tasked with the challenge of shrinking the size of the home to its absolute minimum while still being plenty functional and not being foolish, not wasting the money on building something absolutely too small. So what would be the design of the perfect log cabin with this new restriction put into place? And so what I did was I looked to the past. Basically, if you were to review The previous episode here on Handmade House TV is a great example of a house that is as small as what it possibly can be, but still be functional. A lot of these small little log cabins, and probably the most numerous method of building a log cabin in the history here in America, was this particular style of log cabin, where we would have a front porch on it and a small log cabin and a lean-to addition off of the back. And a lot of these log cabins had the reputation of particularly the number was 12 children associated with it. The large families were often raised in such small structures, so clearly they were functional. And so I was challenged with keeping the aesthetics and basically keeping this size log cabin in mind and bringing it up, seeing whether or not it would meet the modern day expectations of a log cabin. And sure enough, it was. And so this particular log cabin was created. So what we were able to achieve here is a log cabin room that served the family. That was a great gathering place, a place of conversation, gather around the fire. This was the main activity hub of the particular home. And then out back, the lean-to addition on the back of it served as a kitchen and a bathroom area. And then we had one bedroom above. So let's take a look around the exterior of this perfect log cabin. We can see that it has a nice solid stone chimney. And there's a lean-to addition off of the back. And of course, a nice, comfortable and cozy front porch. It has a copper roof which will last a lifetime and be maintenance free. Notice here how I separated the porch roof from the main roof, and we can see a couple of courses of logs between the two. This is a more common method in older log cabin construction, and it's different from the one we covered in our last episode. This side of the cabin is perhaps the most boring side. It's also the side where I counted on any future addition that might be built on this log cabin to come off of, and indeed that's what happened. See this particular window right here? Well, years later, I would start up my chainsaw and convert that into a doorway that would lead into the future home. And this little log cabin that served the clients so well would become a much treasured retreat den within that home. Now, there are a lot of ways that this little log cabin could have been made a bit larger than what it was. One of them would be by adding an addition off of this end when it was built, such as this log cabin here. Or perhaps even a larger addition could have been presented off of the end and a basement put underneath it, such as this particular log cabin where we added a stone addition off of it. And we're going to cover this little log cabin in our next episode here on Handmade House TV. Or maybe even a larger addition could have been put off of the end in the future, such as this farmhouse addition. There are so many options when it comes to starting out with a little log cabin with regard to the additions that we can add. For this particular one, about 10 years later, the clients contacted me and it was time to relocate, to permanently move onto this parcel of land. And they contacted me about adding the ideal addition for it. And after reviewing their needs and wants, and also what I felt would be most attractive to this particular parcel of land in order to complement the landscape, in order to improve the area that it was built in order to build a home that looked as if it belonged there and not something that a tornado picked up from some subdivision and dropped there. We chose to go with kind of a tavern look, a look that's very common here in Virginia. A lot of the historic taverns had extremely steep pitched roofs on them in order to create a second-story floor with a couple of dormer windows. And so we added an addition off of it that was timber frame, and it came out extremely attractive. In fact, this particular addition off the front was also featured in multiple magazines and newspapers, just like this original little log cabin was. A lot of people imagine that if you build a home of logs, it's going to be strikingly attractive, and unfortunately that's not true. If you take much of a drive in the countryside, you can find that that's can be easily proven. So design is extremely critical. When it comes to building your log cabin, if you want to achieve a perfect log cabin, you need to get the design down to a T. Perfect in every way. This log cabin was featured in many publications, from newspapers to magazines to books. Well, all right, let me share with you how this particular log cabin was built, and once we do that, we'll take a peek inside at how it turned out. After the design of the cabin was completed, after we finished our plans and got our building permit, it was time to build our log cabin. And the next step we wanted to do was to secure our logs. Now, we could have sawn logs and worked from fresh, which as many of you want to do, and that's perfectly fine. But I've always preferred, if at all possible, that I work with salvage logs. So I sought out some kind of vintage structure I could work with, and at the time I located what is known as a double pen log barn, and we salvaged the logs from that. And here we have an image of another log structure that I took down and rebuilt that was very similar, that can show you the double pen method of building. It was a very common way of building a barn. Basically, you build two small log cabins nearby to each other with a breezeway area in between, and then you put one large expansive roof over the top. And if you're looking for salvaged logs and you're wanting to build a small log cabin, this is an excellent source of logs. There are a lot of advantages in working with logs from such a barn when you want to build a small log cabin for yourself. There's typically an abundance of logs. But one of the unique features of a barn is they don't have any windows. There are very few openings, so you have a lot of spanner logs, a lot of long logs to pick and choose from in the construction of your small log cabin, and then you cut out the window and door openings according to your plans. We did our best to make use of the vintage notches that were in the corners. They were V notches. But of course, the barns tend to also be a little bit crooked, a little bit out of alignment, and also some of the logs are bad. So you had to pick and choose, do a lot of replacements, and so we ended up having to match and create a lot of new notches as well. Notice some of the tools we use here in the foreground. One of the team members is refining a notch with a hammer and a chisel. And nearby is one of the many sawhorses we kept handy. And in the background you can see a stonemason using his table. All of these are put to use daily on any job site. If you're building a log cabin, you need both a stonemason table and plenty of sawhorses, if at all possible. In previous episodes here on Handmade House TV, I showed you exactly step by step how I build both of these. If you're contemplating building a log cabin in the future, by all means go ahead and knock out these two projects now so that you have them ready to go when it comes time to put that cabin up. Some of the tools we want to make sure and keep handy on a job site, in addition to that hammer and chisel, is an adze, a handsaw, and a chainsaw. Eventually, after we got enough logs up, it started to actually look like a real log cabin. You can see in this image that we had now completed the floor system for the lean-to addition off the back of the cabin, and you can see how we made use of a couple of the logs to create a sliding ramp, which is what we used to pull the final legs up onto the top of the cabin. By building a small cabin like this, no lifting device or crane is really needed. Around the front of the cabin, we did a little bit of timber framing to create our front porch post and the supporting beam that would carry the weight of the porch roof and its rafters. On one end of the log cabin, we built that solid stone chimney which added so much to its beauty and function. If you're interested in learning how to work with stone, I offer a great Stonemason Academy course that you can find over at handmadehouses.com. Once the exterior of the home was completed, we turned our attention toward the inside. Here you can see me demonstrating how to properly install the chinking. It's a great money-saving project for anyone who wants to build their own cabin or contribute a little bit of sweat equity to the project that your contractor might be building for you. So let's take a peek inside of the interior of the home once it was completed. Here we have the stone fireplace. On most winter days, a fire in this size log cabin in a fireplace will keep your entire home toasty warm. In the opposite corner, you can see the doorway that leads back to the kitchen and the staircase that leads to the bedroom, which is located above. Notice also that there's a closet located under the stairway. At the top of the stairs, we see a wonderful, well-lit and cozy bedroom. The log knee wall gives us that log cabin feel, while the painted paneling ceiling really brightens the room up. The paneling is so much better than drywall would have been. Again, by building small, we were allowed to keep the entire cabin to be of the highest quality level possible. Now when we go back downstairs, we can see that this same paneling, along with plenty of windows, keeps the kitchen area bright and showcases our natural cabinets, our wide plank flooring, and our hewn ceiling beams. A quick peek in the bathroom shows that we have all the comforts of modern living in this rustic little cabin. And there we have it. This little log cabin served this family perfectly over the course of a decade. Never once after having built the cabin did they have any regrets or anything that they would have done differently having gone through the experience. Eventually they would add an addition on, and today the family still lives in the home and still treasures it and still has all these fond memories of this particular part of their home. Many different weekend adventures. They loaned the cabin out to many friends who made use of the cabin. It has been a treasured part of their life. Now the cabin was only 700 square feet. Could the cabin have gone any smaller and still been a practical? No, I don't believe it could be. It is the smallest size without getting stupid small, without it costing more only to achieve less comfort, less space. Could it have been a little bit larger? Yes, it could have been. A couple of hundred extra feet, such as adding on that addition that I showed you off of the end of it, could have added a whole lot more benefit to it. What was lacking in this particular cabin? Well, we had to go with smaller size appliances than what you would typically find. They were perfect for a camping weekend expenditure, but if you're actually going to live into it, you probably want a little bit larger of a kitchen, and you cannot increase the size of the lean-to off the back without destroying the overall aesthetics of the home. So an addition off the end would really be needed. Other things that were missing from the cabin was a full-time, in-place kitchen table, which is a really nice thing to have. Kitchen table you could have done many things off of. It could have served as a home office, a place that you wouldn't have to be putting a table up, taking a table down, a place that could have seated 4 or 5 individuals and not just 2. And another particular thing that really could have been used, space that would have been really nice to have, was be a laundry area. Again, this cabin was designed and built as a weekend area. Could we perhaps have squeezed a washer dryer stackable unit in there? Maybe, but it would have been really intrusive. It would have been a little bit too small. So in next week's episode here on Handmade House TV, we're going to talk about bumping it up one more step, about making it big enough so that all of these things that I just mentioned can be added into it. Does it jump the cost of the project? Yes, it does. Is it still a perfect cabin? Oh, you bet it is. I can't wait to share it with you. But meanwhile, as I said in the beginning of this episode, this is the log cabin that is most requested from me, that everyone gets in touch with me. Probably more people are interested in this particular log cabin I built than all of the others combined, put together. This is the perfect starter log cabin. It's really hard to improve upon it, and many people have requested blueprints of this. Currently, what I've done is that I am giving away this set of blueprints for anyone that enrolls in the Log Cabin Academy or the Log Cabin Bundle that I put together. I packaged the Log Cabin Academy along with the Stonemason Academy, so you get both of those critical elements in building your log cabin together. Anyway, if you buy this bundle package or just the log cabin on its own, I'm now giving away this set of blueprints for a limited time to this particular log cabin. And if you upgrade to the entire Handmade House Guild package, you get all of the academies I've ever done, plus 3 different sets of blueprints to some of my favorite log cabins, including this one and the one that we'll talk about next week. So I hope that you'll consider enrolling. The Log Cabin Academy is over 8 hours long of me step-by-step guiding you through the process of building a log cabin. There's a lot more detail there than I could possibly ever share here on Handmade House TV. And you're supporting me. You're keeping these videos and my sharing with you active and ongoing. And I really appreciate it. I really like to pass on to you my several decades experience in creating and building vintage building log cabins, timber frame, and doing some really fine stonework. Before we go here, I want to say one final thing, and that is that I believe that you can achieve the perfect log cabin, the log cabin of your dreams. It's just a matter of taking it one step at a time, of finding that perfect little parcel of land, of achieving the ideal set of blueprints, and then step by step moving through the process of constructing it. My father only built one house during his entire lifetime. He was a businessman, but the day arrived when he would build his own house. And one of the things I remember as a child in the drawers there at home was a set of blueprints. And those blueprints sat in that drawer for probably 10 or 20 years before he actually came to that moment where he was ready to build it. But those blueprints were there as a reminder for him, motivation for him to keep that dream alive. Perhaps what you need is a set of the perfect blueprints for your particular home. And I'd like to give them to you. All you got to do is sign up for the Log Cabin Academy. Come over and see us at handmadehouses.com and sign up today. And thank you again. We'll see you here next week on Handmade House TV. Bye now.